Our old buddy Nick Hanauer. He is an entrepreneur, civic activist, host of Pitchfork Economics podcast. He and Joan Walsh have put together, along with co-author Donald Cohen, who wrote The Privatization of Everything, a new book called Corporate, I'm going to say BS rather than the whole word, Exposing the Lies and Half-Truths That Protect Profit, Power, and Wealth in America. It's published by New Press, thenewpress.com. And Nick, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to see you.
Great to see you again, too. So tell us about the book. First of all, what prompted this book? What inspired you guys to write this?
So, as a progressive activist, I've spent a career running into the objections of powerful institutions, mostly businesses, but also nonprofit institutions like the Cato Institute or whatever it is that do the bidding of big business. And, you know, what I found in my long career of doing this is that every time you try to improve the lives of ordinary people, you run into this buzzsaw of objections that what we're trying to do will be bad in some way, shape, or form. And after having listened to hundreds of those over my career, I by chance bumped into, or actually I'd known Donald Cohen, who had taken a year off in sabbatical and had, because of his similar life experiences, had spent a year in the Library of Commerce gathering these quotes. And the really interesting thing about these statements is that they always come in basically the similar forms of the same thing, as they use pro-social arguments for anti-social ends. And each of those lies, you would call them, on their own are plausible. Like when you hear them for the first time, they're plausible. But when you see the lies in the context of the hundreds of years of similar lies that have been told, they become absurd, just ridiculous. And he and I, and then Joan, decided that what would be good for the order is to gather all of these quotations from powerful interests that are trying to protect their profits and organize them in a way and show people these quotes that in a way that will effectively inoculate them from believing them in the future, right? Because again, when you hear them for the first time, it sounds plausible until you realize they've been saying the same kind of thing for 100 years. Right. And so really that's the purpose of the book, is it's sort of like a vaccine for your mind, so that when you hear this BS in the future, you won't be so persuaded by it.
Before we get into exactly what those statements are, and I'm looking forward to hearing the details of this, because that was a pretty general overview. I'm wondering your thoughts on how and when everything changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 1950s, and my dad was a Republican, and he worked in a tool and die shop. He was kind of the shop manager. He did the books for them, and he knew how to run all the machines too. He was a member of the machinist union, negotiated the union contracts, and his shtick, and he and I had many conversations about this in the 50s and 60s, was that business has a social obligation. Business has multiple stakeholders. The business has a responsibility to its employees, to its community, to its customers, to its shareholders, and to its and to produce a quality product. And it seems like in the 70s and certainly in the Reagan Revolution 80s, the whole Robert Bork and neoliberal idea that really the only stakeholder a corporation should pay attention to is its shareholders took hold. And lives to this day. Can you identify a turning point in America? Because Eisenhower ran for re-election in '56 on the fact that he had added 1 million people to the union rolls in America and 2 million people to Social Security.
Right, absolutely. So there are two strands that I want to address. The first is that, to be absolutely clear, powerful interests have sought to protect their interests in this way since the beginning of time. The slaveholders were, one of their favorite arguments for defending slavery was that it was good for the slaves.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis is trying to revive that.
That's right. That the slaves would be harmed by being free. Right. Which is a classic. This is the same argument that folks like that are making against the minimum wage today. Is that, well, we could pay them more, but that would be bad for them because we would have to fire them. Right. So make no mistake, people have been making these arguments in this insidious way since the invention of power and capitalism. What changed was that for quite a long period of time, the government of the United States and the democracy of the United States worked quite well and protected people in a really effective way from many of the most insidious things. And then when the neoliberal revolution hit in the mid-'70s and early '80s, it made it much easier for corporations to take advantage of people, which is what we see today, every day, whether it's, and of course there are a million examples of that. But for sure, we did live through a period where corporations took their social responsibility much more seriously than they do today, or they have for the last 30 years.
Yeah. So what are some of these narratives that these businesses and politicians, frankly, the politicians that they own, that they've been pushing?
Right. So we identify 6 distinct narratives. Again, they always take the same general form, which is to use a pro-social argument for anti-social ends. But the 6 basic patterns are: it's not a problem, number 1. Number 2 is the free market knows best. Number 3 is it's not our fault, it's your fault. Number 4 is it's a job killer. Number 5 is you'll only make it worse. And number 6 is socialism.
Right.
And those are basically the constructs that these folks use again and again and again to defend their interests.
Yeah.
And the book is really meant to be this amusing encyclopedia or compendium of corporate lies and malfeasance. And it's just great fun to go through because, again, the latest lie always is somewhat plausible. But when you look back in history at defending lead or saying that cigarettes are good for you or whatever it is, it just becomes more and more clear how ridiculous these lies are.
We're talking with Nick Hanauer. He is the co-author with Joan Walsh of Corporate BS, Exposing the Lies and Half-Truths that Protect Profit, Power, and Wealth in America. And BS is all spelled out if you're looking for the title on your favorite bookstore.